Number 10. Rareness of new characters. With the exception of a few, many of the characters we've seen in these games seem to be continuously connected back to the lore of the Aftons. A lot of the humanoid characters in the games that aren't the Aftons simply tend to be their victims in some way. This means that either Gregory is going to be some kind of victim of theirs, or is actually somehow related to the Aftons. More than likely, at least based on what we've seen already. Of course, the same could be said for other new characters, or character, Vanessa and Vanny. Assuming, of course, like I said, that they are the same person. Then I guess they're a character. However, it is possible that Gregory will be neither and will simply become a new protagonist separate from the status quo, without him being a full-on murdered victim and without him being related to the Aftons in any way. Like I said though, it is surprisingly rare in the games for us to have a character who has both no connection and doesn't end up somehow hurt or murdered by William, so some people get a little bit of both. Number 9. Freddy and Friends on Tour, Episode 3. We see another connection to the crying child with the third episode of Freddy and Friends on Tour. Almost every episode seems to have some kind of connection to the games in terms of their location, and with episode 3 it almost appears as though the animatronics antics are going on within the house that we see in FNAF 4. The painting at the end of the corridor they run around in, the purple flowers in the vase, and the windows above the doors all evoke some of the feel and look of that house that we see in FNAF 4. This house is believed to be the Afton house, with both Crying Child and his sister Elizabeth each seeming to have bedrooms in this house. Freddy and Friends was created to help tease the release date and contents of Security Breach. So is it possible that this episode is teasing a connection to FNAF 4? And could that connection lie with Gregory? And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to hear more crazy outlandish theories from our brains, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. You know Connor and I have those theories for you, and our wild brains. Number 8. Glamrock Freddy. One hint that Gregory might actually be Crying Child could come from the story and mechanics that we know about in Security Breach. I don't know if you've noticed, but the coloring of Glamrock Freddy actually seems to be closer to Golden Freddy than Freddy Fazbear himself. And what do we know about Gregory and Glamrock Freddy in the games? Well, we know the two team up and that Gregory even hides himself within Glamrock Freddy, perhaps foreshadowing or mirroring the possession or connection between Golden Freddy and Crying Child, who is believed to be one of, if not the spirit that haunts that animatronic. I'm not saying that this is hard evidence or anything of Gregory being Crying Child, but the subtle similarities between the two seems to suggest that Gregory hiding in Glamrock Freddy could be a nod to CC and likely could be a hint at their connection. Number 7. 80s connection. While many people often point to the fact that Security Breach is meant to take place in the modern day and Crying Child was around in the 80s and 70s, you know, living his life, doing his thing, this doesn't actually disprove anything. Now, there are two ways that this could be dealt with. Either Security Breach, with its very 80s motif, isn't really set in the modern day, as we've been led to believe. Or, you know, time travel is a thing, and maybe Gregory is the Crying Child but simply time traveled, perhaps through the ball pit, from the 80s Fazbear establishment to the modern day one, the Mega Pizzaplex. I'm just saying that's a lot of 80s styling that we have in this game. Perhaps too much 80s style for it to be considered modern day. I remember when this game was first announced and we were like seeing some of the images from it, I was like, I feel like that's going to be in the 80s, and everyone's like, no, it's modern day, Amanda, it's modern day. And I'm like, really? Because I feel like, I know 80s is trendy right now, but I don't know. I'm just saying, if it ends up being in the 80s, that's what I was thinking. Number 6. Kidnapped. This point actually comes out of something I've been pondering on for a while. While initially deep diving into the FNAF security logbook, I had a couple of theories. One was that Crying Child could be Michael Afton, and that Michael perhaps was brainwashed to forget who he was before, or, you know, forgot due to brain damage. Crying Child therefore didn't really die, but survived and became Michael in some way. My other theory though was that Crying Crying Child was never really William's child, but instead was kidnapped and brainwashed into thinking he was William's child. In fact, at the time, I thought it would actually make more sense if this were true for all of his children, which in that case could mean that both my theories were true, and Crying Child was kidnapped, brainwashed, seemingly died in the bite of 83, and then was re-brainwashed or reprogrammed to believe he was Michael. So we kinda got like a reset? If Crying Child was taken, then what if what we are seeing in Security Breach is that incident? As I said previously, I know we are being led to think this game takes place in the modern day, but what if we were wrong? What if these are somehow events that come before the bite of 83 and the missing children incident that we believe was in 1985? Is it possible? And if so, will Gregory turn out to be the child who goes on to become perhaps Crying Child and later Michael? This could be the incident where Gregory gets taken away and then becomes someone new. Of course, how is Vanny in the game? I feel like that's going to be a question people are going to have, and I don't know. Time travel. I'm not sure what's happening there. Number 5. Robo-Children. If Michael is actually a realistic humanoid animatronic of some kind, and if Michael and Crying Child happen to be separate children and separate entities, what would stop Crying Child from returning as an animatronic? In fact, it is possible that William rebuilt Crying Child as an animatronic, but that Robo-CC escaped his father, and so he simply made Michael from scratch to replace Crying Child. Or perhaps none of these children were ever real, Elizabeth included, and they're all animatronics and have been since day one, and Crying Child just was an animatronic child that ran away. It would make sense considering the mystery of Mrs. Afton continues to go unresolved, and since I'm not really sure who would let someone as strange as William Afton adopt kids. I mean, I guess he wasn't always so strange. Perhaps before the killings he was like a super responsible parent and people were like, yeah, you should totally have kids. You seem like a real nice guy, William Afton. Anyways, if Robo-CC was a thing and then that animatronic escaped, is it possible that even if we are in the modern day with Security Breach, that Gregory is that animatronic? Because after all, if he was an animatronic, then he wouldn't age, right? After all, we saw in the Silver Eyes trilogy a similar scenario where Charlie learned she was one of a few different animatronic versions of the real-life Charlie that were made by Henry after he lost his flesh and blood daughter and also lost his mind. Is it possible that this story serves to lay the groundwork for what is going on here with Gregory, possibly being a robotic version of the Crying Child? And if so, perhaps he came to the Mega Pizzaplex on purpose. Perhaps he is here to end his father, William Afton, for good. Maybe it's William that should be afraid of Gregory, I don't know. Number 4. FNAF 4 protagonist. Something that is very interesting is that we don't really see many other child protagonists in the Five Nights at Freddy's games. Despite this whole franchise really appealing to a younger audience, many of the protagonists we play as are adults or young adults. There has only been one other time we played even as a child protagonist, and that was during FNAF 4. Do you know who that protagonist was? I mean, you're here watching this video and we've talked up to this point, so I assume you do. It was Crying Child. Yep, it was Crying Child. Considering there was only ever one other child protagonist we got to play as, it seems likely that this time around, where we once again play as a child, that we could be playing as the same child from FNAF 4. Now if that's the case, it would mean that Gregory is the Crying Child. Of course, they could be two separate child protagonists, but just saying it's really rare. Number 3. The parallels continue. The crazy thing is that the FNAF 4 connections don't really end there with the whole child protagonist part. Not only is Security Breach the only other game with a child protagonist in the franchise thus far, but the stories even overlap somewhat in terms of broad strokes. Both seemingly center around a child who experiences some kind of horror or trauma, ruining a family-friendly place they initially loved. Both also have a child protagonist who is guided or aided in some way by a bear figure who seems to understand the situation that said protagonist is dealing with. Some also think that the purple animatronic hand we see in the trailer that is claw-like resembles the look of a nightmare animatronic, and some also see parallels between how Vanessa and psychic friend Fredbear both seem to try and comfort the protagonist in their respective games. Number 2. Recurring. Just think about all the other games in the franchise. Many characters are recurring, and we've played as the same protagonist before in this series. In both FNAF 1 and FNAF 5 sister location, we play as Michael Afton, or at least we appear to be playing as Michael Afton anyways. And in FNAF 3, there are many people that believe we are still playing as Michael in that game, although it's not really confirmed. The fact that recurring characters and protagonists are a thing in this world also seems to suggest that this could be the case this time around. And like I said, we've only seen one other child protagonist, so CC, is it you? Number 1. Similar appearance. So the look of Gregory and Crying Child isn't a one-for-one by any means, but they do have similarities when it comes to their appearance. Namely, they have the same hair color. I mean, also we don't really know Crying Child's eye color, but they also seem to have the same eye color. They both have dark eyes. Gregory has brown eyes. Crying Child has black eyes, I guess. Not really a thing, so I assume they're supposed to be brown. Also, while we haven't gotten a great look at Gregory's outfit via the trailers, some fans have taken to drawing him with 2 stripes on his shirt, which would also make him resemble Crying Child. We don't know if he's got 2 stripes on his shirt, and in fact it seems unlikely just based on what we've seen of him, but he could end up having those stripes, and if he did, that would be another similarity. We'll likely even see Gregory cry in game, as everything that appears to be happening to him is really scary, so there could also be that as well when it comes to his appearance. Number 10. Appearance. It is possible that Vanessa's appearance could hint at her connection to the Afton family. Many have said that she resembles Elizabeth Afton quite a bit, who appears to have somewhere between blonde and ginger colored hair, more like a strawberry blonde in my opinion, and green eyes. Vanessa shares these features, and her eyes are a very standout green color. Because of this, we could consider that she might be related to the family in some way, considering she shares that appearance. Does she resemble Elizabeth so closely because perhaps she is her mother? And has Elizabeth been born yet, or are we meeting Vanessa Afton before she was married and had children? Where this takes place in the timeline, or which reality even, obviously plays heavily into helping us lock in our speculations as bona fide facts. But also, that timeline's a mess, so good luck with figuring that out. Number 9. Our hero. Another reason that Vanessa could be related to Afton is that we could see her be taking on the role of another daughter or some other relation. Perhaps she is the twin sister of Elizabeth who lived and who up till now we did not know about. Vanessa does seem to be possibly following a trajectory similar to Michael Afton's as a hero who is aware of the danger around her and who is set out to stop her father's work, put an end to it, and free those who have become his victims. Now, in this case, not necessarily saving her possible other sister, Elizabeth, who's already been freed we believe at this point, but instead the child known as Gregory. However, it is possible that this is just what Scott Cawthon wants us to think, but is setting us up for a huge reveal in terms of Vanessa's true allegiance and identity instead. That good old misdirect. Number 8. Elizabeth Afton. The other theory is that her appearance resembles Elizabeth Afton because she is her, but the reason why we know this isn't true and can be dismissed is that we know her name is Vanessa, not Elizabeth, and we know her age is 23 from a scrapped email found within the code of special delivery. The email lists her as Vanessa A, 23 and working in the security department. Well, it just says security, but I'm assuming it's the security department. That has to be our Vanessa, right? I mean, it would be too strange if it were some bizarre coincidence. Also, Scott loves leaving little Easter eggs for us, so it seems likely that this description is meant to belong to Vanessa from Security Breach, who we see as our security guard. So this would then imply that Vanessa is 23 years old, which means, unless this is some alternate virtual inspired version of Elizabeth recreated in a game, something like we saw in Help Wanted, that she couldn't be Elizabeth, as Elizabeth died when she was young. So we can dismiss that theory that her resemblance means that she is actually Elizabeth somehow and not Elizabeth's mother. Number 7. Robot Elizabeth Afton? I know I just said there is no way that Vanessa could be Elizabeth or be directly connected to her without being her mom, but hey, let's play devil's advocate for a second. After all, if we think back to the timeline and all the hints that a lot of the events in the games took place in possibly like the 70s or the 80s, it seems unlikely that in 2020, where this game seems to take place, Vanessa could be Elizabeth's mom. I mean, when was Elizabeth born? When did she die? It just doesn't really make sense in regards to the already messy timeline, because I can't really figure in how she could be her mom unless that happens after, and it's all very confusing. However, is it possible that Vanessa is Elizabeth, somehow reborn? Perhaps like what we saw with Charlie in the books. She was recreated basically as like a robot. Elizabeth in this case could be made by William Afton herself, and made to simply appear as human, and then be renamed as Vanessa. Or perhaps she is simply a new creation who is a robot made to believe she's William's daughter. Maybe all of his children are actually, or were actually, robots made to seem like or believe that they were human. Whoa. What? Number 6. Her age. 23 is a very specific number. What does this possible age for Vanessa tell us about the character? Well, if we had a more clear family timeline, well, that would help a lot. Or even information as to if William's children are naturally born of him and potentially his wife, or his lover, or if they were adopted, or what. Who are these children? Where did they come from? These are questions I have. Sadly, we don't really have any of that information. In fact, I don't even really know how old William Afton is at this point, even though I know he's dead. Like, how old would he have been when he died? When was he born? I got a lot of questions there. So we have just a lot of speculation. A lot of fans theorize that if there was a Mrs. Afton, that she possibly died tragically in a car crash. And it does seem that Ballara is based off of someone who was close to William, possibly someone who brought a lot of joy and love into his life who he missed. Is it possible that this person is Vanessa, who maybe met him through a job working at Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex? We don't know as of yet, but it's a possibility. Perhaps we are meeting Vanessa before she becomes William's love or wife, or perhaps just his baby mama. Who knows? Number 5. Vanessa A. In scrapped emails found in Special Delivery, where we also found hints for Vanessa's age based on the area she is listed as working in, we also got a hint as to her last name. Assuming this is the same Vanessa, of course. Her last initial is given to us here as A. Obviously, this has driven fans wild and caused them to believe that yes, she is definitely a member of the Afton family tree. Is Vanessa Afton, however, William's wife, or could she be another relative, another child of his, or possibly his sister or his cousin? Perhaps there is a less direct connection to Michael, Elizabeth, and William here that could also be explored. But either way, Afton begins with an A, and Vanessa's last name likely does as well. I love connect the dots Easter eggs like this. I need like a connect the dots FNAF book, and it's just like a bunch of random hints that we've gotten of things, and you have to try to be like, how do these all connect to each other? Someone make me a book like that. I will buy it. Number 4. Vanny. Many have theorized that Vanny and Vanessa are indeed the same person, and we have scrapped and hidden emails from Special Delivery to prove it. There are a few emails addressed to Ness, or Nessie97 as she is known, that imply Ness works for the company. It is believed based on the content of the emails that Ness is indeed Vanny, and we can theorize through these similar names that the two characters are actually one and the same. Perhaps different personas belonging to the same person. One of which is infected perhaps with the virus from William Afton, which has her possessed by Glitchtrap, making her kind of like the new Glitchtrap, if you will. Or perhaps her participation is more willfully involved than we suspect. I mean, just because she was referred to as a reluctant follower doesn't mean that she's still one now. Either way, Ness's username of Nessie97 could imply that Ness was born in 1997, as people often use their birth year in usernames to more easily identify themselves and for, memorization purposes, because you usually don't forget what year you were born. If Ness was born in 1997, this would mean by the year 2020 that she would be 23 years old. What? Especially if this game takes place, I think, after September, which I think is her birth month. That's also in the emails. If she is 23, this would match the age that was given to Vanessa A's records in the other scrapped emails. Connect the dots, FNAF edition. Number 3. The new antagonist. Vanessa is also believed to be an Afton because if she is Vanny, she has some murderous tendencies for sure. I mean, she certainly appears menacing and dangerous in the trailer, and once again we also have evidence from the scrapped emails of Special Delivery to back up her sinister presence and possibly plots. It said that a virus was moved into some sort of programming using a false credential which allows those using the credentials to override security protocols on animatronics. Uh-oh. It's also implied that Ness could be the culprit, although her fellow colleague is willing to believe that it wasn't her. Please. I don't know why I laughed at that, but Louis just cracks me up in these emails. He's so needy, and he's so like, please date me, I'm Louis. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Louis, take a hint. I don't think Ness is interested. I'm sorry. We also know that Ness has been buying human-like face masks and has ordered fabric, possibly to build her bunny costume. Number 2. Heir of Afton. Because of Vanny's menacing presence, who many believe to be Vanessa A, or in these emails V_A, another persona just to add to her long lists, we can also find another connection here to the Afton name in the role that the character plays. Vanessa could actually be an active participant in this plot who is only pretending to be a good security guard to lure in her prey more easily, which would make sense given what we know of the games and how victims are usually ensnared or entrapped in such a manner in the stories told there. Because of this method, it is possible that Vanessa could actually be the heir of William Afton and either be taking up his last name in honor of him, and maybe she's not directly related, or she could actually be a relative of his, a daughter who has taken up the role of carrying on her father's vision, taking his place as the resident mass murderer of the Freddy Fazbear franchise. Number 1. Animatronic Master. Like a puppet master, you know? There are also theories that Vanessa has gone beyond the villain she aspires to be in terms of her capabilities, not just setting the animatronics loose on innocent victims and altering their safety settings, but in fact manipulating and controlling them remotely, including Vanny. Something that Vanessa could be an Afton who aspires to be even greater than the person she reluctantly serves, and controls Vanny from afar, not appearing as her. Now, this would also protect her sort of like seeming innocence as well, so pretty smart. People have cited Vanny's jump scare and glowing red eyes as evidence, as well as her constant references to glitching out, implying that if we are in the physical world, that Vanny is actually a robot or animatronic controlled, perhaps even built, by successor Vanessa Afton.